Well, hello and welcome back to Classroom. I'm excited for you to join me tonight on looking at Google Classroom and scoring with rubrics. Please feel free to add comments into whichever platform you're looking at, Facebook, YouTube, wherever, and ask questions as I will be monitoring that tonight. So hello and welcome. There's this new feature in StreamYard, so it's going to be a little new for me is where I can actually add my Google Slides. And so I'm really excited about this so that I can put these right in here. It's a little bit easier to navigate. So new for me, let's see how this goes. I would invite you to visit backtoclassroom.org. Backtoclassroom.org is my Facebook group where I share Google Classroom tips. I share tips about Google Classroom as well as products that work really well with Google Classroom, like Formative, Moat. I love Moat. I was just using this week. I just love to get my voice in to my student comments so that they can hear me and hear my tone in my feedback in Google Classroom. Pear Deck, of course, and Schoolitics, and Screencastify, and so much more. So please go to backtoclassroom.org, and that is how you can join the conversation and ask questions about Google Classroom or about this broadcast. So welcome. Thanks for joining. I am Alice Keeler. I am a high school math teacher. I am in Kansas. I taught math this morning, and it's the last week of the semester, and it's all I've ever wanted was to finish at winter break. In my old school, we would come back after 2 weeks and have to do finals, and I'm just so excited to be able to enjoy my break because I don't know about you, but I'm so ready to just relax and not think about school for a couple of weeks. So it's exciting for me. Last week, and of course, some of my students want to know how they can do all of their work in 1 week. And I'm like, well, I don't think you can do a semester's worth of work in 1 week. So let's see what you can do. Let's go ahead and work together. So thanks for joining me. I also am a developer. I code for Schoolitics.com. Schoolitics.com. Please, I'm going to put this down into the chat. It is free for teachers, and I would love it if you would create a free account to help me keep my job so I can keep creating free and awesome resources for you. And of course, I am the co-author of the book, Stepping Up to Google Classroom. And so if you're new to Google Classroom, I encourage you to get my book. Let me put the chat to this, alicekeeler.com/books, where you can find my book on Stepping Up to Google Classroom, Google Jamboard, and I have other Google Classroom books that you might be interested in. So thank you for joining me at backtoclassroom.org. So let's get into it. I am a teacher and I like to start grading. And this is one of the things that saves me so much time is when I do go to Schoolitics.com, it says start grading. You see this little home screen of tiles that shows me a variety of things. The one over there on the right says what percent I've graded and how many files I need to go through. This is literally just saving me hours. I'm able to blast through this. In fact, one of my students today said, Miss, you're like the only teacher who's caught up on their grading because you have this Schoolitics thing. And that's so true. I don't think I've ever been caught up in my grading in my whole life. Although one little frustration is I am a coder. I code solutions for Google Classroom, and you just cannot code rubrics. Rubrics cannot be coded. I just can't make third-party add-ons. So while I make all these cool things for Schoolitics, I am not able to do this with rubrics. So I'm going to show you how I made a spreadsheet template for you that has no coding required and how you can get all of your rubrics in there, whether or not Google Classroom allows third parties like Schoolitics to code it. Okay. Oh, someone's grading with rubrics right now. I hope I have a few little tips for you. Thanks for joining. Oh, let me do this show. I love it when Melody McAllister joins for me because she monitors the chat and she's really good at this. Hi, Melody. Sorry you couldn't join. Happy birthday to your kids. So I'm going to be monitoring this myself with this new feature where I can put slides right in the StreamYard. So I'm very excited about that. I'm very passionate that a rubric is not a percentage. It was never intended to be a percentage. And I literally quit a job one time where the system forced you to grade on a rubric, but then converted the rubric scores to percentages. And I'm like, This is not right. It's like literally not right. It's bad practice. Some engineer has designed this, not a teacher, not anyone who knows anything about grading practices, and you're forcing me to poorly score students. And I'm like, I'm not going to be a part of that. So our grading options cannot be A, like a perfect score, A, C, F, or really a low F. If you grade on a 4-point scale, 4 out of 4 is 100, 3 out of 4 is 75, 2 out of 4 is 50, and 1 out of 4 is a 25. Are we seriously giving out 25%? This cannot be our scale. Our scale cannot be majority fail. And that's really the problem with a 100-point scale, is that the majority of it, 60% of it, is failure. And we really can't tell the difference between an 88 and an 89. And we sure can't tell the difference between an 89 and a 90. And of course, there is a margin of error on anything that we grade, that I'm a human being and I'm not perfect. So let's not pretend that we can even grade so accurately to the decimal point, because we certainly cannot. And that's why we use rubrics, right? We use rubrics because we are human beings and we're not perfect. And this really helps us to be more consistent. But then we have to start thinking about the math behind it. Right, so I'm actually not going to really talk about the math behind rubrics today. I would love to chat with you about that another time. So we're going to look at scoring guides, and scoring guides are actually not a rubric. Scoring guides help you to score. So a lot of times we mistake saying this is a rubric for our scoring guide, when it's just something to help us to assign points. Okay, so now in Google Classroom, it is the rubric option. In Google Classroom is the rubric option that allows you to do a scoring guide. But again, we often confuse rubrics and scoring guides and use it like they're interchangeable. And so you can see that's why they put scoring guides underneath rubric. But we're going to specifically look at tonight how to do scoring guides. So when do I use a scoring guide? When the points and the score do not match, right? I want to grade on a 5-point scale, but it's worth 70 points or something like that. Or if you have a lot of different criteria and you're trying to give points per criteria and you don't want to add it up yourself. And so that scoring guide is helping you to assign points, right? And so my main reason that I like to use the scoring guides, besides all those good reasons, is I don't like to type scores. I feel like in Google Classroom, it is so tedious to, like, if say it's a 4-point scale, 4 enter, 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 like, and then of course, inevitably I accidentally type 44. So I like to avoid typing student scores into Google Classroom because it's slow and because I make mistakes. And so this is where a scoring guide can really help me to get through this a heck of a lot faster, as I'm not entering in those individual scores. So what you're going to do is you're going to create any assignment in Google Classroom, create any assignment, and you'll notice that there's an option for create rubric. And you can create the rubrics right in Google Classroom. And I'll tell you what, I hate doing that. And I'm going to show you how to do it. And then I'm going to show you an alternative so you don't have to do it that way. So when you click on rubric and you click create rubric, it's going to bring up this option, and it defaults to use scoring. So it defaults to a scoring guide rather than a rubric. And we are looking at this specifically. We are using scoring. We are using scoring. And so what we're going to do is we're going to create something where we want to keep it generic. We're going to keep it generic. So I'm going to call this one, like, I have a class activity, and I'm going to give a 10 for meets expectations. Now I encourage you to follow Thomas Guskey and Rick Romelli, who are grading experts, and get some of their advice around rubrics. I'm a particularly big fan of Dr. Thomas Guskey from the University of Kentucky. Pretty sure that's where he's from. But anyway, T. Guskey on Twitter, great follow, and he has some great books. So we don't use exceeds expectation, because if we're saying full credit, that is what we expect, then they're actually meeting our expectations. So a 10, and then of course we will approach expectations. And I'm really like, fight me on this. A 70% is really a D, and 80% is really a C. I mean, it's the lowest, and 80% is the lowest B that you can have. Then it's not really a B, because of course I'm not really that accurate. So I like to put it in the middle. So I'm going to go ahead and put 8.5, 7.5, and 6.5 here on my generic rubric. And I can reuse this for like all my assignments, no matter how many points the assignment is worth. I can just use this generic scoring guide to say they met expectations, they approached expectations, it's below expectations, or it's far below expectations. And points in the rubric are not the same. So when I go into Google Classroom and I've added the rubric, I can actually just go ahead and make the points whatever I want. So I have this 10 points criterion, but I'm only gonna make the assignment worth 3 points. I have a project right now where I've put together a scoring guide, and there's 260 possible points on my scoring guide. Don't ask, I obviously got out of control, but the whole thing's actually only worth 50 points. So it'll scale it all down. So I love this, that I can have my rubric just be whatever scale I want, and it will automatically adjust for how many points I give the assignment. So they do not have to match. So you see in this screenshot, my assignment's worth 3 points, but the rubric itself was on a 10-point scale. All right, so what's really nice about using the scoring options, the rubric feature in Google Classroom, is I can just click on the meets expectations or approaches expectations, and it puts the score in for the student. Like, I don't have to, in that left column over there on the roster, I do not have to type their scores. I just find it so slow and tedious. So I love that it'll just do that for me, and I can just click over there as to if they meet, approach, or are below expectations, and then it adjusts the score. So you'll see that on my rubric that I had approaches expectations was an 8.5 out of 10, but my assignment is only worth 3 points, so it put it as a 2.55. So it automatically does all this math and does it for me and really makes it a lot quicker and easier. So again, this isn't really a rubric. This isn't how you do rubric scores. This is how you do a scoring guide, because it's literally about how to give points. Okay. Now it's really important, as always, you return. So when I mark things on the rubric, on the scoring guide, it puts it as a draft. The students will not see the rubric and they will not see their score until you return it. This is an essential part of Google Classroom. Return all of your assignments, releases their score. All right, well, let's just go ahead and take a look. So I have a Google Classroom here. It's just got a bit of a sample. There we go. And I'm going to open up here to your score. I have an assignment. You'll see that I have this rubric on there, and I'm going to click on view assignment. So once I'm in there, I'm going to click on Carolyn, and you can see that I have this scoring guide uploaded into the assignment. It's right here, and I can just click on expand criterion so I can see what things that I had put. So it's meets expectations, approaches expectations, below expectations. What I really want you to pay attention to is over here is I'm not going to type the score in for Carolyn. So she has an approaches expectations, so it puts it in a 2.5. I have Effie, and nothing against Effie, but just to demonstrate how this works, I just click on far below. It's so quick and easy. I click on it, it puts the score in there, and I don't mess it up. So all I have to do is think about, and once I've memorized it where those positions are, I don't even need to expand it out anymore. I'm going to say, okay, approaches expectations. And sorry, Lauren, I got you at far below. So I have those scores. And again, it is super important that we return. So after you give those scoring guides, that you return it so that the score is released to the student and so they can see what you put on the rubric. All right, if you have any questions about this, please feel free to add that into any of the chats. If you're on Facebook, if you are on Twitter, if you are on YouTube, I'd like to see your comments. I'm going to go ahead and go back to my slides so we can see how much faster it is to use this as a scoring guide. Now, what you'll notice is I actually only had one criteria because I just want to be able to quickly enter in scores without having to type them for enter, all the way down. So it is definitely much faster to just add this generic scoring guide into every assignment. So I create the generic scoring guide, and I'm going to reuse that every time. Now, I don't like to make it in Google Classroom itself. It's, to me, very slow. It doesn't, I have to keep typing meets expectations. Like, I don't want to keep writing that over and over again. So I have a spreadsheet that says no coding. It is simply spreadsheet formulas. If you'll go to alicekeeler.com/GC scoring, try this. http://alicekeeler.com/GC scoring. There you go. Okay. So if you will use that template, you can use that every time to much more quickly and easily create rubrics. But more importantly, it is a spreadsheet. Shocking. Alice is using a spreadsheet. If anyone knows me, they know that I love spreadsheets. So that's really great for me. It's also really great for you. But of course, these Google Sheets spreadsheets save automatically to Google Drive. And that's probably one of the most unnerving things is wait a minute. How do I save this? How do I get it into Google Classroom? It just saves to Google Drive. You just close it. You make your rubric and you close it. Wait, I just closed it. You just close it. So it's really that simple. The thing that I would encourage you to do is to have a rubric folder in your Google Drive that you save all of these rubrics that you create into that folder. So it's really fast and easy and meaningful to reuse them. When you try to reuse rubrics from Google Classroom assignments, the problem is they're saved as the assignment title rather than the rubric title. So I have a collaboration rubric, I have a group rubric, I have a quizzes rubric, I've got a rubric for all kinds of different things. And I title, a rubric for essays versus a rubric for warm-ups versus a rubric for class participation. So I want to keep those titled really nice in my folder in my Google Drive, and that really helps me to reuse it very quickly. Okay, can we see what the students get back? I'm not in a student account right now. I think it could be better, but it's better than nothing. Jim, what I can put for you in here is I can grab the class invite link and I'll put that down into the chat. So you could join that Google Classroom if you'd like to see what it looks like for that particular assignment. And once you join that classroom, here is the assignment link. And I will turn that, I'm going to change the class code at the end of this presentation. So if you're watching right now and you would like to join into this Google Classroom and try and see what that rubric looks like from the student point of view, please do that now. Okay. Yeah. Sure, you bet. All right, so I'm going to hide the current. They have made some new updates to StreamYard that I'm very pleased about. That's very helpful. All right, well, thanks for joining in. Okay, so let's go ahead and we'll take a look at how this does. So when you go to alicekeeler.com/GC scoring, and I'm going to model this in a second, it's going to save your band. So you see that it starts with meets standard, approaches standard, below standard, and unacceptable. Those are in there by default. So if those are the ones that you use, it's going to be there all of the time. And then every time you add a new row, those are going to be automatically copied down. So I think that's one of the big advantages to doing this with the spreadsheet. And again, this has no code. It's just spreadsheet formulas, is I don't have to retype meet standard, meet standard, meet standard, meet standard like 100 times. So this is going to be a lot faster, and it organizes in my Google Drive. Also, since it's in my Google Drive, it's really easy to share the rubric. You could just tweet out the spreadsheet and other people are going to be able to make copies of the spreadsheet. It's in their Google Drive, and then so easy to add that right into Google Classroom. So I definitely prefer to do all my rubrics, 100% of my rubrics, I like to do them in Google Sheets. So the new rows are automatic. So what you're going to notice on here is that I've created in this particular scoring guide, it says quizzes. I'd love to use quizzes. And then I basically do it as a pass-fail. Like I tell the kids they have to get at least a 75%. And if they get a 75% or an 80% or whatever my cut point is, they get full credit. Okay. So then as soon as I start typing quizzes and I start entering that in there, it gives me the option to put a new row of criteria. So I put on here that they did multiple attempts. So in quizzes, what I will do is I'll use the question bank option. So it just gives them 3. So maybe I want them to get at least 3 questions. I want them to get at least 80%, and they have to take it at least twice. Might do something like that. So I've added that into my scoring guide. And then you see it gave me this third one where it says title and description. says title. That is just going to keep popping up. So it's going to say title description, title description, title description. And all you have to do is delete the word title and delete the word description to get rid of that, because otherwise it's just going to keep automating. Hey, do you want to do another one? Hey, do you want to do another one? Unlike Google Classroom, we have to keep adding it manually. So this is going to be a lot faster and easier. It's just, you just click delete, just click on it and click delete. And then you just upload the assignment to Google Classroom, choosing import from Sheets. So let's take a look at what this looks like. So I'm going to come on back over here, and I'm going to go to alicekeeler.com/GC scoring. It's going to prompt me to make a copy. Yes, please. Just give it a second to prompt the copy. Let me zoom in here a little bit. Make this easier to see. Now I have some defaults because, again, the majority of the score range should be passing. And in fact, I'm going to change this to 7.5 because I like to be in the middle, not at the bottom of the scale, because really, what's the difference between an 88 and an 89%? What's the difference between a 90 and an 89%? I mean, really, I'm going to argue that a 60%, yes, a 60% is really an F. It's really pretty much 59. So I always try to go for the middle instead of go for the bottom. And so all I'm going to do on here is I'm going to decide, first of all, I'm going to name my rubric. I like to put the word rubric in it. And then what kind of rubric? This is my participation rubric. I don't necessarily put rubric in there twice. And then you'd want to click on this folder icon to move it to your rubric folder if you have one, so that you can just save it in that folder. You don't have to. I mean, it's saved to Google Drive. It's floating around in your Google Drive. But I think we all like to have it a little more organized than that. So I highly recommend that you click on the folder icon and do have a rubric folder that you save these into. Okay, so the first thing I want to do is that you have a good attitude. Participate in class fully, right? So as I type in the title, as I type in the description, you'll see it gives me, like, I can put more titles and descriptions. Now these are optional here where it says description. It'll just put the word description into the thing. So you probably want to put something. Participated the whole time, was enthusiastic to learn, participated most of the time, was late joining the conversation, or had lulls in participation. So however you want to describe those. So, okay, so we have a good attitude, that they would just think, pair, share, participates with a neighbor to discuss an idea. So again, you'll notice here the title and the description just keeps showing up. I've now have a third row, but the most interesting thing here is that I have meets standard, and the approach is standard. So maybe you use some different verbiage. So I put up here meets expectation. Whoops, not sure what I accidentally put there. Expectations. And you're going to see that they now all say meets expectations. So it does copy it on down. So I only have to put it in there once. And then maybe on this 8.5, you're like, I like 8.7. Cool. And then you'll notice these all change to 8.7 and 8.2. And you can see that they all change to 8.2. So I only had to type those in once. Unlike when I use it from Google Classroom, I got to type that in every time, or I can duplicate the whole row, but it duplicates all my descriptions and things. And I'm like, why do I have to delete this out every time? So I definitely prefer this, right? And that they submit evidence of participation, turned something into Google Classroom, right? And you'll see it just keeps doing this. It just keeps giving me title and description. So I'm just going to click on the word title and hit the delete key. Gone. Click on the word description, click away from the description, and you'll see all of that is gone. And so now I am set. So what do I have to do to get this into Google Classroom? I close it. It's very disturbing. Like, wait, what? You just close it. It's saved in Drive. It's ready to use, and you can use it as many times as you want. So I create this participation guide. I create this scoring guide for when we do any kind of participation activity, and I can just add that into any assignment anytime right from that rubric folder. So I'm going to go onto the classwork page. I'm going to click create. I'm going to create an assignment. And I just come over here to where it says rubric down here. I click on that and I choose import from sheets. So this is how I pretty much 100% of the time add rubrics or scoring guides into Google Classroom. I do it from sheets. So if you use aliceco.com/GC rubric or aliceco.com/GC scoring, you're going to be able to create all these rubrics because they do have to have a very specific format. So I do encourage you to check out my template, which again is not coded. It's just spreadsheet formulas. So I just import from sheets. I just made it, or I can go find it in my Google Drive. Here it is. Here's my rubric of participation. And you see it pops up here for me to edit and to make any adjustments to it. That looks pretty good. That's what I wanted. And I just click save. Like when I do it from the spreadsheet, I pretty much just hit save. I don't have to do anything to it. Right there in Google Classroom, I'm able to add it very quickly and easily. Now you'll see that this rubric is out of 30, and I'm going to change it because I only want this whole assignment to be worth 7. I don't know, because I'm being funny. Okay, so I'm going to click assign, and then on that assignment, I go into the assignment and click here on Alice. I can expand out all of my descriptions if I want to see what I wrote. I'm like, okay, so she approaches standards here. It's unacceptable here. And she meets expectations there. So it just click, click, click. It's really easy, and it calculates the points for me. So now this was 23.7 out of 30, but it scaled it to 5.53 out of 7. So I didn't have to do any of that work, right? So here we have Carolyn. Expand it out. She meets expectations and approaches expectations. And here's Effie. She just met all of the expectations. So full credit, she gets 7. Kimberly's been having a rough week. She just really didn't do as much. So now she's sitting here at 5.74. And Lauren, give her a little bit. Right? And so everyone has their points, and I didn't have to type any of it. I just love that. It's so much faster and easier to use this scoring guide, and helps me to be more consistent. And then I just click return. Now this is really important. You click the return button. So we're going to return those. It releases the score to the students and allows them to see the rubric and the points. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and switch back to my slides. Melody's here. Yay, Melody. Happy birthday to your kids. I love that picture you posted. And I'm glad that you are enjoying this webinar. Thanks for coming in. All right, so that's how easy it is. I'm just going to back this up just a little bit. Do aliceco.com/GC scoring. Let me put this back in the chat, aliceco.com/GC scoring. If you don't want to do it with scoring points, you just want to give them some feedback, which that's our definition of a rubric here. aliceco.com/GC rubric will allow you to do the same thing, but without points. So you can go ahead and use either of those to create a copy of a spreadsheet to help you score in Google Classroom a little faster and a little more efficiently. Right? So it's on the spreadsheet. You organize it in Drive. You just type in for the title description. A lot of that stuff just copies down. You want to once you're done, you're like, I don't need this row because it's going to keep giving you rows. Just delete out the word title, delete out the word description, and go ahead and import from Sheets. And now that it's in there, just open a new assignment, import from Sheets, import from Sheets, import from Sheets. Easy to find. It's right there in your rubric folder. Awesome. So thanks for joining me. Please, please, please go to visit backtoclassroom.org. That is our Facebook group where we're continuing this conversation about how to grade in Google Classroom tips, and how to use tools like Mote, Formative, Paradex, Schoologic, Screencastify, Adobe, and more to enhance our use of Google Classroom. So please join the conversation, and we'll see you at backtoclassroom.org. And thanks for joining me for Scoring with Rubrics in Google Classroom.